The predator emerged from the dark mist at the edge of the HFI city, its silhouette sharp against the faint lights of distant towers and flickering street lamps. Its movements silent and deliberate as it stepped onto the cracked pavement, feeling the vibrations of the city beneath its feet. It paused for a moment, letting its senses reach out, tasting the tension in the air, the faint scent of fear and excitement mixing together in a way only a hunter could perceive. The streets were alive, with unsuspecting humans moving through their routines, oblivious to the presence that watched them from above. Every flicker of light reflected in its multifaceted eyes, and every distant sound reached its ears, as though the city itself whispered secrets meant only for its shadows stretched along the alleyways and rooftops, creating a maze of dark lines where the predator could hide and wait and observe, its gaze sweeping across the square below, noting patterns, the way people walked, the way they hesitated, the way they glanced over their shoulders when a dog barked or a car horn blared. Each micro-movement told a story of fear and hope and desperation, and the predator absorbed every detail, letting the data build in its mind, calculating angles, distances, times, and reactions, like an intricate puzzle only it could solve. It crouched low, feeling the air on its skin, the faint shift of wind telling it where the humans were concentrated and where escape routes might exist if it chose to act. A group of street vendors moved past, carrying trays of glowing food and humming devices that blinked and whirred in ways that predator found fascinating. It observed their gestures, their voices, their laughter and murmurs, noting which individuals seemed aware of the strange pulse in the air, and which were completely ignorant to the invisible eye that followed them. It paused briefly on a lone woman holding a small child, her eyes darting nervously to the shadows, but she did not yet see it. She did not yet know that it considered every possibility, every outcome, as it balanced curiosity against instinct and the strange feeling that this hunt might be different from any other. From the rooftops above, pigeons scattered into the air, and the predator's gaze followed them, noting their flight patterns, the way they adjusted midair, the way their shadows danced across the cracked streets below. It shifted slightly, its body blending into the night seamlessly, its movements smooth and practiced like liquid darkness flowing over stone and metal, each step silent as it approached the edge of the plaza. A low hum of machinery and distant voices filling the space around it, yet failing to disturb its focus. It crouched higher, lifting its head slightly as it scanned the crowd again, letting its presence stretch over them like an unseen weight. Time seemed to slow, and the city moved unaware, and the predator stood motionless, a phantom in the shadows, and in that moment, it was aware of everything and nothing all at once. It was the hunter, it was the observer, it was alone, and yet connected to the pulse of the city below, feeling the heartbeat of the humans and the rhythm of its own breath, the weight of its blade at its side, and the endless possibilities that stretched before it in a night that promised tension, danger, and the unknown. It crept along the rooftops and alleyways, its body moving with a fluid grace that betrayed the lethal precision within its bones. Each step measured, each movement calculated as it scanned the crowd below like a predator reading the minds of its prey. It paused briefly on the edge of a broken ledge, watching the humans shuffle through the streets, their laughter and chatter mingling with the hum of machinery and distant sirens. Yet none of them sensed the eyes that followed every twitch, every glance, every subtle hesitation. It noted the way a man adjusted his coat, the way a woman clutched her bag tighter when a child brushed past her legs, the way shadows fell and stretched in the dim light, all small details that formed a tapestry of movement and emotion that only a mind trained to hunt could decipher. From above, the predator could see the intricate web of pathways the humans followed, unaware of the invisible threads that connected them. Every cluster of people, every solitary figure seemed like a puzzle to be solved. It followed the rhythm of their steps like a dark symphony, each sound a note, each movement a beat. The city itself pulsed beneath its feet, and it became part of that pulse, the wind brushing against its skin, carrying scents and distant noises, telling stories of fear, hunger, curiosity, and longing. It crouched low on a metal beam, letting the vibrations of the city inform it of the positions of every human in the square below. Sudden scream from a vendor startled the group, and the predator froze, letting the chaos play out in microseconds in its mind. The humans scattered instinctively, some running, some hiding, some turning to face an unseen threat, yet the predator remained still, a shadow among shadows, unseen and unfelt, its eyes sweeping across the crowd, analyzing who posed danger, who posed curiosity, and who would be ignored. It tilted its head, following the trajectory of a child who stumbled and fell, yet quickly regained balance, The predator's curiosity flared a strange pull, unlike the thrill of hunting or the satisfaction of tracking. It was something new and unfamiliar, something that caused it to hesitate and observe rather than strike. It moved silently from one vantage point to another, the rooftops offering a network of angles from which to watch and plan each movement like a dance choreographed over decades. It noted the reflections of light on metal and glass, the flicker of neon signs that distorted faces and figures below, the shimmer of water pooling in cracks and crevices, and the slight movements of rats and birds that added to the pattern of life in the city. It paused above a fountain where a couple leaned close, their whispered conversation carrying through the night. It considered descending, yet curiosity kept it aloft, and it allowed the humans to continue unaware their presence now, a test and a lesson, stretched thin, and the predator remained a ghost in the city, unseen, yet ever present, its mind cataloging everything, the rhythm of human motion, the spread of fear, and the flicker of hesitation. It learned as it watched the humans moved and adapted its senses, sharpened the balance between patience and action, and it became more than a hunter. It became an observer, a shadow on the pulse of life below, waiting for the moment when instinct would demand choice, yet understanding that in this moment observation was power and patience was survival. A child ran through the plaza laughing and spinning, a small glowing toy that left streaks of light in the dim streetlights. The predator's eyes followed every movement, every shift of weight, every tilt of the head, every turn of the tiny feet. Its instincts flared in a familiar pattern, the thrill of the hunt, the anticipation of a strike, yet something stopped it, a subtle hesitation. Buried deep in the part of its mind that rarely questioned the rules, it crouched on the edge of a rooftop, hidden in shadows, watching the child weaving between the crowd and narrowly avoiding the bustling legs of vendors and merchants. It noted the way the child's laughter rang clear like a bell in the night, cutting through the tension, and for a moment the predator felt an emotion it could not name, curiosity perhaps, or caution perhaps, a new thread of thought in a mind trained for killing. The humans around the child did not see the shadow that followed them, unseen, above their heads, yet the predator observed the micro-reactions, the subtle glances, the slight pauses, the way the mother tightened her grip on a bag and glanced nervously at the square around them, all of them unaware that they were being watched by something that could erase them in an instant, yet chose not to. Each heartbeat, each shuffle, each whispered word catalogued in the predator's mind. It was not hunger or anger that dictated its restraint in this moment. It was something far stranger, a question of why. A tiny life that seemed insignificant yet fragile drew attention stronger than any prey it had encountered in countless hunts across worlds and cities. The child stumbled once, tripping on a loose stone, and the predator tensed, ready to descend in a blink, yet it did not. It froze mid-stride, letting the fall happen naturally. The child regained balance, laughing and brushing off dust. The predator's curiosity deepened, noting the resilience and the joy in the smallest gestures, as if life itself radiated in defiance of the shadows around it. It watched the child spin once more, and almost felt a pull to understand rather than destroy, to observe rather than strike, and that realization settled like a weight that there were rules even it could not break, impulses that demanded waiting, patience, and learning before action. The crowd flowed around the child, oblivious to the danger that hovered above them like a storm cloud, yet completely invisible. It analyzed the way the humans interacted, the small gestures of protection, the instinctive ways they shielded and guided the pariah, the child's innocence, acting like a barrier of sorts against the predator's instinct. It crouched lower, hidden by the folds of the rooftop, its blade still at its side, gleaming faintly in the city lights but untouched, waiting and watching the world below as it moved in rhythms and patterns so different from the cold, predictable hunts it had known before. The night stretched on, and the child continued through the plaza, sometimes stopping to glance at a shiny object, sometimes turning to greet a companion, yet never sensing the presence above it. And the predator's mind recorded everything, every twitch of emotion, every instinctive reaction, every burst of laughter. It felt a strange recognition that in this moment the hunt was not just about survival or victory, but understanding, and that sometimes the most powerful choice was not to act, to observe, to wait, and to learn the dance of life. Below, continuing uninterrupted while the shadow lingered silently in the night, with a swift motion, the predator drew its blade from the sheath strapped across its back, the metal gleaming faintly in the ambient light of the HFI city. The edge was razor-sharp, honed through countless hunts and battles across worlds, yet tonight it felt different in its grip, the weight familiar yet foreign, as if the weapon itself demanded restraint and awareness. It held the blade at an angle, catching the light just enough to throw flickers across the walls and streets below. The crowd paused mid-step, sensing something they could not see, a shift in the air, a ripple of tension that made hearts race and eyes dart instinctively toward the shadows. The predator's eyes swept across the plaza, its gaze calculating the distance between itself and each human, noting who moved with confidence, who hesitated, who might be danger, and who was simply caught in the invisible web of its observation. It crouched low, testing the balance of the blade in its hand, flexing its fingers across the hilt, feeling the familiar hum of energy vibrating through the metal. The city noises faded in its awareness, replaced by the rhythmic patterns of breathing footsteps, murmurs, whispers, and distant shuffles, like a symphony of life. Unaware of the dark presence that measured it all below, a group of merchants and bystanders froze suddenly, their laughter faltering, as if a collective instinct warned them something was wrong. The child ran past, spinning the glowing toy, and the predator followed, its motion eyes flicking from the tiny figure to the scattered humans. Each step analyzed, each pause noted every heartbeat and tremor, catalogued for understanding. The blade felt alive in its hands, responding to the tension in the air, to the possibilities that stretched in every direction, to the choice between attack and observation. It flexed its muscles, feeling the thrill that came with drawing a weapon, but restrained by curiosity and an unfamiliar impulse that had nothing to do with fear or hunger. The shadows deepened around the predator as it shifted its stance, the edge of rooftops and metal beams cutting sharp lines in the dim light, its gaze never leaving the crowd. The humans whispered among themselves, eyes wide, hearts racing, as if sensing a phantom they could not name. It tilted the blade ever so slightly, catching a glint that made a young man flinch. The predator's mind catalogued the reaction, calculating the potential chaos and the patterns of survival instinct that humans carried within them. Yet still it did not strike, for the pause was deliberate and purposeful, teaching observation and patience, and letting the humans confront the invisible tension. Time stretched thin as it crouched, waiting, breathing, blending with the night air, listening to the symphony of life below. The child stumbled again, a tiny misstep that drew its attention, yet the predator remained still, letting instinct battle curiosity, letting observation teach restraint. Its blade was a promise of power, a symbol of precision, a reminder of the predator it was. Yet it also became a question, a contemplation of limits and choices. In a world where the rules were not always written in blood or instinct alone, it was learning something new, something it had never understood fully until this night. The difference between power and control, the strength in patience, the danger in rushing to strike. The crowd continued to shift uncertainly, eyes scanning shadows, bodies frozen or moving in hesitance and confusion. The predator remained poised, testing the weight of the blade, flexing muscles coiled and ready yet restrained. Learning, watching the rhythms of human fear and innocence combined, and the strange realization settled that sometimes the most lethal force is not the strike but the decision not to strike, letting the tension linger, and teaching that presence itself could command attention and respect without a single move. A whisper ran through the crowd as the humans began to sense the tension. The air thick with a presence they could not see, their movements slowing, their laughter fading, their chatter replaced by small, uneasy murmurs and glances toward the shadows above. Some instinctively clutched bags or children tighter, others froze mid-step, hearts racing, unsure what force hung over them. It was a weight in the air, a silent pressure that made even the bravest hesitate and look around, as if the city itself had shifted and the streets had become a different place entirely. The predator observed every reaction, every subtle twitch, every widened eye, noting which humans panicked, which calculated escape routes, and which seemed paralyzed by confusion and fear. The child ran past again, laughing, unaware of the dark gaze. Following each movement it stumbled on a loose stone, and the mother instinctively reached out, grabbing the small hand, pulling the child close. Their eyes scanning the surrounding shadows for signs of danger, yet they found nothing. The predator remained hidden in the dark, its blade still gleaming faintly in its hand, catching the reflections of broken neon signs and puddles of water on the cracked pavement. It crouched low, testing the balance in its grip, flexing its fingers and the small muscles of its arms, feeling the tension and the power coiled within the weapon. Yet restraint ruled over instinct, patience over the desire to strike. A merchant dropped a tray of glowing fruits, sending them rolling across the plaza, the sound echoing unnaturally in the sudden hush that had fallen over the crowd. The humans jumped, startled their attention, snapping toward every dark corner, every shadow, every flicker of light, as if the city itself had become alive and aware of the predator above them. The predator tilted its head, observing the chaos, noting how small movements created ripple effects, how fear traveled faster than sound, and how hesitation could freeze a person in place. It crouched silently on the edge of a rooftop, blending with the shadows like smoke, its body still yet alive with potential energy. A coil ready to strike yet unwilling to break the pause that had already created fear without action. Stretched the night seemed endless, the humans whispering among themselves, eyes darting and fingers gripping bags or children. The child continued moving, weaving through the crowd, laughter flickering and fading like light in fog, each step measured. In the predator's mind, as it calculated not to strike but to understand, to learn the patterns of life and fear, the fragile resilience of the humans, and the invisible bonds that tied them to one another, and to the city itself. The blade reflected faint light across the walls and streets, casting shadows that danced with the human movement below, creating a dynamic interplay of tension, anticipation, and silent power. The predator allowed itself a slow, deep breath, the subtle vibration of energy through its body, a reminder of the strength it could wield, yet the restraint it maintained, a lesson of control, observation, and patience. It watched the humans flinch at shadows and whispered to one another, glancing up at rooftops that held no visible threat, yet the presence was real, the tension undeniable, and the predator's mind recorded it all, cataloging reactions, patterns, and instincts, as if creating a map of fear and caution that could be studied for a lifetime. The night carried on, the city alive with movement and murmurs, yet the crowd now moved with hesitation, each step careful, each glance searching and cautious. The predator remained poised, watching, absorbing, understanding that sometimes the greatest power lies not in action, but in letting presence itself command attention and respect, letting the fear ripple without breaking the moment, letting the humans confront the invisible and unknowable. The predator crouched silently on the edge of the rooftop, muscles coiled and senses stretched to the maximum. It felt the weight of the blade in its hand, the cold metal humming faintly, as if alive, yet its mind wrestled with an unfamiliar conflict, an internal struggle that had never surfaced in countless hunts across countless worlds. Instinct demanded action. The thrill of the chase pulsed through its veins, urging it to strike, yet a new impulse held it back, curiosity perhaps, or caution, or a recognition of the fragility of life. It did not yet understand. The humans below moved like ants, oblivious to the shadow above, yet their movements carried lessons, their gestures and reactions rippling through the predator's mind, cataloging fear, resilience, hesitation, and instinctual protection. It shifted slightly, letting its shadow blend with the darkness of the rooftop, and allowed itself to analyze every angle, every possible outcome. The humans were unpredictable, and yet predictable, each reaction like a code waiting to be deciphered. The child ran past again, spinning the glowing toy, and the predator's gaze followed with a focus that bordered on fascination, not merely hunger or instinct, but a desire to understand why this small being drew attention stronger than any prey it had encountered. It considered the consequences of action, each strike measured impossibility, and each hesitation noted as a test of patience. The humans were alive, yet fragile, moving through patterns that revealed their inner instincts, and the predator studied these patterns as it had studied countless hunts before. Yet tonight, the rules seemed different. A sudden shout echoed from a vendor as a tray of glowing objects tipped to the ground. The humans scattered instinctively, some fleeing, some shielding, others searching the shadows with wide eyes and trembling hands. The predator froze, observing, noting the ripple of panic, and how it spread faster than any movement it could make. The fear itself became a signal, a lesson in anticipation, control, and restraint. It flexed its fingers along the hilt of the blade, feeling the familiar hum of energy vibrates through its body, and yet the decision to act remained unmade, as if the choice to strike or wait carried more weight than any kill before. Its mind wandered into unfamiliar territory, the idea of patience, control, observation over the thrill of the hunt, a strange understanding forming that strength was not always in the immediate strike, that power could be measured in restraint and in the silent command of presence. Alone, the humans below continued to shuffle and whisper, eyes darting to shadows that did not exist, and yet were real to them. The predator's instincts pressed against this new thought, urging action, yet something deeper countered the urge, reminding it that sometimes the most lethal force was the ability to wait, to learn to understand before deciding. The night stretched on the city alive, with quiet tension, the humans moving carefully, their instincts guiding them, yet unable to name the cause of their fear. The predator crouched silently, its senses absorbing every detail, every shift of weight, every flicker of emotion, cataloging and analyzing, storing knowledge not yet fully understood yet powerful in its revelation. It flexed muscles, coiled and ready the blade. A promise of potential destruction, yet restrained by an internal lesson, a new rule that sometimes observation could teach more than action, and that restraint could command attention in ways even instinct could not predict. It tilted its head, listening to the hum of the city, feeling the pulse of life beneath its feet, realizing that tonight it was more than a hunter, it was an observer, a shadow in the night, a presence that could shape fear and understanding without striking a single blow, letting the humans confront the unknown, letting patience and reflection define the encounter as much as any weapon or kill ever could. Slowly the predator began to step back from the edge of the rooftop, each movement deliberate, careful, precise. Like a shadow dissolving into darkness, it lowered the blade slightly, its grip relaxed yet ready to snap into action if necessary. The crowd below remained tense, their breaths shallow, their movements hesitant, their eyes darting toward rooftops and alleyways that held no visible threat, yet every instinct told them something waited unseen, something dangerous and intelligent. The child spun around mid-stride, laughing, unaware that the invisible weight above had shifted, and that the threat had pulled back but not disappeared. The predator's eyes swept across the plaza one last time, recording every heartbeat, every micro-expression, every ripple of fear and relief. It noted the subtle changes in posture, the slight loosening of shoulders, the way some humans began to whisper among themselves, glancing at one another, as if confirming the danger had passed, yet others remained frozen, caught between relief and lingering terror. It crouched low, blending into the shadows on the edge of the rooftop, letting the night reclaim its shape around it, its body becoming part of the darkness as it tested the boundaries of patience and observation. Every step backward was measured, the predator maintaining awareness of escape routes, vantage points, angles, and obstacles, while resisting the urge to strike, curiosity and restraint waging a silent battle against instinct. The city around it hummed with life, unaware that the presence above had chosen hesitation over action, that the moment of ultimate power had been replaced by reflection and analysis. The child laughed again, running between the crowd, oblivious and untouchable. Yet, the predator's focus remained sharp, cataloging the dynamics of movement, the ebb and flow of fear and relief, the subtle cues that revealed who was alert and who was distracted. The humans began to relax slightly, yet the tension lingered there, instincts heightened by the unknown presence that had hovered above them like a storm cloud without sound or movement. Their eyes scanning shadows while voices whispered about ghosts or myths or the impossible. Some held children closer, others checked corners and rooftops instinctively, yet no one could locate the predator or explain the invisible pressure that had controlled the night. The predator crouched even lower, feeling the rhythm of the plaza, the pulse of life and the wave of emotions that radiated from the humans below, and in that moment it understood the power of restraint and the subtlety of influence. It moved backward along the rooftop with the grace of flowing water, never losing sight of the crowd, never relaxing, its focus muscles coiled, ready for any shift in the pattern that might demand action, yet allowing the humans to experience the release of tension as the invisible force receded. Each heartbeat catalogued in the mind of the predator, each micro-reaction stored as a lesson in observation and patience, in control, and in the delicate balance between fear and safety. As it stepped back into the darkness, the plaza seemed to exhale, the humans adjusting posture, breathing more easily, their eyes still scanning, but their movements slowly returning to routine. The predator melted into the night, a ghost retreating into shadows, leaving only whispers and the memory of its presence. A silent reminder of the encounter, a lesson in the power of observation and the strength of restraint. The city resumed its rhythm, unaware of the eyes that had studied it, and the decisions made in silence that had altered the experience of every person below. Moments later, the predator vanished completely, slipping into the shadows as if it had never existed. The city hummed around it, the soft mechanical noises of distant vehicles and the faint chatter of humans filled the plaza, but the pulse of fear lingered like a ghost. No one knew exactly what had been there, or how close the danger had come, yet everyone sensed the change. The sudden absence of pressure, a space once heavy with anticipation now emptied, yet still alive with the memory of presence. It crouched atop a distant rooftop, watching the humans below slowly returning to routines, small gestures of relief, flickering in expressions and body language. As the invisible weight above dissipated, the crowd began to disperse, some whispering to one another, recounting what they felt without seeing, some glancing nervously at shadows that seemed to twitch or stretch unnaturally, some holding children tightly or gripping bags more securely, yet none could pinpoint what had hovered over them. The predator observed it all from the darkness, cataloging reactions, recording subtle changes in posture, in breathing, in micro-expressions that betrayed lingering tension. It allowed the humans to move and breathe again, experiencing the fragile relief that followed fear while still remaining unseen and untouchable, a silent phantom in the night. Every movement it made was measured, deliberate, like water flowing over stone. Unseen yet shaping the world around it, its mind catalogued not only the humans' reactions but also the patterns of light and shadow, the reflections of neon signs on puddles, the small shifts of wind, the subtle vibrations carried through metal and pavement. Each detail storing knowledge about observation, patience, and control, a map of influence created without action, a lesson in power conveyed entirely by presence and restraint. It was more than a predator tonight. It was a teacher, a shadow of understanding that left no mark yet altered perception profoundly. The child ran past one last time, spinning the glowing toy, laughing, and oblivious to the invisible force that had hovered over it. And the predator felt a subtle recognition of life, resilience, and innocence, a faint pull in its instincts that had nothing to do with hunger or aggression, and everything to do with curiosity and comprehension. It studied the way the humans recalibrated their movements, the way they whispered and laughed nervously, the way they glanced toward the rooftops and shadows, without fully understanding what had been there. The predator noted every detail, every ripple of fear and relief, storing it like data for future encounters, patterns of existence and reaction, etched into memory without a single strike being delivered. The plaza emptied, it shifted again, slipping along rooftops and down narrow alleyways, blending seamlessly into darkness. It became a ghost, moving over the city, observing lights and reflections, analyzing movement and instinct, letting the humans continue unaware, yet forever changed by the encounter. A quiet tension lingering in the edges of memory, the predator's mind processed the night in its entirety, the ebb and flow of fear, the micro-expressions, the resilience, the patterns of life, and the choice to step back instead of striking alone in the shadows. It paused atop a distant tower, letting the city stretch out below, the pulse of life continuing, unabated yet subtly altered by the unseen observer. It reflected on the restraint, the patience, the quiet power of presence, and understood that tonight's survival was measured not in strikes but in observation, in timing, and in knowing when to disappear, leaving only memory and whispering tension behind. Alone in the darkness, the predator crouched atop the highest tower, its eyes scanning the city below. The plaza, now quiet, the humans moving through their routines, unaware of the presence that had watched and analyzed them. Its mind replayed the encounter, every step, every glance, every heartbeat, catalogued and understood, a symphony of motion and emotion that had unfolded in silence. It considered the child weaving through the crowd, laughing, the mother clutching hands, and the subtle expressions of fear that had rippled through every person it had observed, and in that moment it realized that power was not measured in the strike, but in restraint, in observation, and in the quiet dominance of presence. It flexed the muscles along its limbs, feeling the familiar hum of energy through the blade strapped across its back. Yet the weapon had not been used tonight. It had only existed as a possibility, a promise, and a lesson, a symbol of potential that had not been realized. And the predator understood that sometimes the greatest acts of strength were the ones that left no mark, and sometimes the most profound choices were those that involved stepping back, allowing life to continue, while still asserting dominance through patience and awareness. It reflected on the fear it had created and allowed to linger, how it had shaped the humans' movements, their gestures, their awareness, without a single blow being struck or a single life altered permanently. The city lights shimmered below, and the wind brushed against its armor, carrying with it the scent of smoke and oil, and the faint aroma of cooked food. It had catalogued these details as it moved through the night. Each smell, each vibration, a lesson in the pulse of life and how creatures adapted and reacted instinctively to stimuli. It considered how the humans would remember this night for years, perhaps exaggerating the invisible presence in stories and myths, creating tales of a shadow that observed without being seen, and in this reflection, the predator felt a subtle understanding of influence that went beyond immediate action. It thought about the child, the innocence untouched, the resilience displayed in small gestures, and the subtle joy that had persisted. Even under tension, it understood in a way it had never understood before that life could be fragile, yet unyielding, that patterns of movement and emotion held significance beyond survival, and that observation could teach lessons that violence never could. Its mind catalogued the interplay of fear, relief, curiosity, and instinct as a complex system worthy of study, worthy of respect, and worthy of patience. The predator shifted slightly, letting its form dissolve into the darkness completely, becoming one with the shadows of the tower, and the city below it watched for a final moment, feeling the rhythm of the humans returned to normal, the small acts of laughter, whispered conversations, cautious glances, and confident strides, all forming a tapestry of life it had influenced without touching. And in this quiet reflection, it understood that true mastery sometimes lay in watching, waiting, understanding, and knowing when to step back. As the night stretched on, the city carried on, unaware, yet subtly altered. The predator remained still, a silent observer, a shadow that had passed through the hearts and minds of those below, leaving lessons in fear, in resilience, in patience, and in presence. It flexed one last time and allowed itself to disappear into the dark, the night itself, reclaiming its shape and leaving only memory, tension, and the quiet reflection of a predator who had learned that sometimes the greatest power is the choice not to strike.